Good day, family, and welcome to another episode of Faith Talk. I'm glad that you were able to join us today. Listen, Bethlehem is coming to you every week with faith-filled, positive content. That's what we want to bring you. So today we are here with another episode, but I want you to do this favor for me. Share this to whoever you want to share it to so we can let them know that we are encouraging them and helping them grow in their faith. We are so glad and excited of the positive messages and the comments and the feedback that you've been giving us for the show. We really do appreciate it. So we want you to continue to keep sharing. All right? Do that for me. Bless you. Today we have a very special guest with us today. We have here the Reverend Thomas Williams, a great man of God. He oversees our church administration and our Christian education here at Bethlehem. Such an intelligent, brilliant, powerful man of God. And he is going to share with us his story. We're just going to talk a bit. He's a great friend and brother, and I appreciate him for joining us here today. How you doing, man?
Man, I'm blessed. And first of all, let me just say I'm so proud of you, what you are doing here with this Faith Talk. First of all, I'm excited to be on it and just so proud of what you're doing with it and how you're speaking to the people and just putting out there some positive message in a time where we really need it. So God bless you, man. Keep on doing what you're doing.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you. I don't know if you want me to call you Reverend Thomas or Thomas, or because when we talk, I just call you Thomas. So, Thomas, let's start here. When did you have that first moment for you in your life where you met God and you knew you needed a relationship with Jesus Christ?
Great question. It's a little layered. Preacher's kid like yourself. Always been in church, spent my life in church on a literal basis. And so always around the fire, if you will. Always knew it. But it really was, my sister went on this thing called Youth on the Move for Christ, Bishop Donald Hilliard in New Jersey. And at that time, he wasn't Bishop Hilliard, just a young brother doing church in everybody's church basement, if you will, in the evenings. And I remember going with my sister Tammy to see Donald Hilliard and just hear it. And I tried to hide behind a post because it was one of those messages where it felt like he was talking about me and all in my business and everything. And I tried to hide, tried to run. And as like that day, I said, okay, I need to give my life to Christ. And I believe I was 16. So knew about him all the time. I was a great Sunday school student, enthusiastic member of the church, but baptized as of like 5 or 6, but I gave my life and that relationship that you spoke to. 16.
Right, great. 16, yeah, that's cool. Like 16, I think that's around ages where we there's a term, I forget the term, where every time during the summer after school, during the summer break, there would be that time where teenagers who grew up in church, they would get saved every summer.
Yes.
We would get saved every summer, and when school started, and we backslide, and we go back to whatever we were doing that was in sin or whatever. So every summer we cry at the altar, well, I'm sorry, God, and all that every year that was. So that reminds me of that, being at 16 or younger and stuff like that.
So true.
Cool. So Thomas, you are, like you said, you're a preacher's kid just like me. You grew up in the church. Both of your parents were preachers. Tell me what is that like? Tell our audience from the perspective of the preacher's kid, growing up with two preachers in the home. What was that like?
Two preachers. My sister ended up being a theologian, at Duke University. Brother's a chairperson of the deacon board for like 20. Now he's the old deacon. It's kind of funny to think about that. So it was the family business, if you would. It was very it was very, it seemed normal to me because that's just how it was. And I come from a family of Poe preachers. I have uncles and cousins that are
Right.
Poe preachers.
Right. Me too. Me too.
So you were a preacher or you were drinking. One of the two was the reality. But in all seriousness, it was great. My father was in school. I remember going to it was New Brunswick Theological. I think it's now Rutgers Theological, and it literally is a campus on the hill. And I remember rolling down the hills while he would be in the library studying. When I went away to college, that's when my mother went back to school to get her master's in divinity, and my sister going out there. So my father always challenged us. You just couldn't go home. You had to pay attention to what the sermon was.
Right.
You're driving in the car, you're going home. So what did Dad preach about today? And my brother would be like hitting me, it's your turn to answer and the like. So I learned to exegete at a very young age.
Wow.
Because you couldn't just give just a simple
Generic
answer with
answer,
him.
yeah.
He would be like, oh, what about this point here? And what did you think about this here? And so, and my father's before there was Al Sharpton, there was Alexander Williams. So my father's the original Reverend Al.
Wow.
And my father he was very loud and boisterous, and he had a big, deep voice. And so you were going to get interrogated that whole way home. So I learned very early, you might as well pay attention. You might as well go back. And back then, before 16, we were silly. We were watching people
Right.
see who's going to get the Holy Ghost,
All
see
the
who's
time.
going to fall out there. The mothers of the church would, they would shake you, if you got caught sleeping or if you running around a little too much.
All
Or,
the time.
So back then it was a great, very affirming relationship. I tell you the truth. I'm proud to grow up in the black church. That peculiar creature called the black preacher changed lives and transformed families. I learned really how to read. I learned how to present. A lot of things that blessed me in high school and college, learned in church. Sister Pauline Codwell, in Sunday school, you will sit up straight. You will look forward. You will answer intelligently. You will speak articulately. You will do it with full sentences. So a lot of the growing up came through the church. And then it was my mother, when I started preaching, she used to break down, you're trying to do a New Testament, an Old Testament, bring out something here. Just said, preach the word that's in the text and break it down. That's where then I realized there's a treasure trove in Jesus wept. You could just go so far with that. So it was a blessing. At the time, if you'd asked me that question then, it would have been eyes rolling, head shaking. Why me? What's wrong with these people? But in hindsight, it was what a great blessing.
Wow, great. So you mentioned about growing up where you had to answer questions where your dad would ask you, what did I talk about, or what point was this, and what did you think about the sermon? So like you said, you had a sense of exegeting a text or deciphering a sermon,
Yes.
even at a young age. So through that point, from your teenage years or whenever point, when did you sense a call to preach?
I probably sensed the call to preach when I was 18. Now, here's the reality, though. I was running away. I had everybody in that church prophesying all my life,
Oh, Lord.
You are the one. You're gonna be like your father. You're gonna be up there.
know it well.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And just tell the story. And, I wasn't saved all my life. I told you I got saved later, and,
Right.
and thank you for making it straight. We were backsliding,
Right.
And even in the midst of my salvation. Thank
Yes.
God for His grace.
Yes.
I said all that to say this. I remember being in a service. I was out the night before. There's no need to go into what I was doing, but I was out the night before, and I'm still not kind of straight. And I got people telling me what the Lord is going to do, and I'm like saying, "If only you knew," But we were raised to be respectful, so yes, ma'am. I
Right.
was smiling and the like. But I truly was running away, because the other part of the question you asked earlier, what was it like growing up there? I had seen people call my father in the middle of the night, can you go out to the jail? And actually he happened to be not a counselor, what do you call that?
Chaplain?
Chaplain at the county jail. So if any of my friends got in trouble, I would hear about it, But he was a chaplain at the county jail, and I had people call him up for troubles, problems, and then not be there, for service, or not be there just around. Where are you? I've seen him, take the offering money, his salary, and pay the light bills with that. I've seen him go without so that the church could go and all that. The last thing I wanted was to be a preacher. I told God that. There was no contradictions. There was no confusion. It was clear. No. And I tried to avoid it. So when it really hit, Lexi was born, I was 24. I was literally walking down the street praying and just asking God. I was talking about boys' names. I was sure that we were going to have a boy. And all of a sudden, like a light, it was like, name the boy Jonah, because you're running away.
Wow.
That then became my trial. So, some people have that great Elijah, here am I, send me, some people have those Isaiah callings, Jeremiah calling those fire shut up in my bone. No, mine was, call the boy Jonah, because you're running away. And at the same time, it confirmed what happened to me at 18, and 18 was crazy, was I'm in the middle of White Castle. I don't know if you know White Castle place. White Castle is a place you go to after you've been to the party. It's the only place open at, late in the midnight hour. Yeah. And I had this weird dream that I was preaching in White Castle. Wow. And the crew that's in White Castle, that I was witnessing White Castle. So I totally had dismissed that. And here at 24, when I'm hearing that, call the boy Jonah because you're running away from White Castles, the Xers, the Us's, the ones that you really need to be sharing and ministering to. And so that's when at that point, I couldn't run anymore. I went in, that was a Saturday night. I went in Sunday morning. It was Sunday school, and I taught Sunday school. So in between Sunday school and the service, I snuck into Pastor Turner's office. Pastor Turner, I got to talk to you. He goes, sure, son, go ahead out, send the deacons out and all that. And he goes, and I told him about my dream, and I think I've been called. I'm waiting for him to talk me out of it. I'm waiting for him to explain why it really wasn't. And he goes, well, I've been waiting for you. And I was like, oh, okay. It's on.
Reluctantly. It was a reluctance to the
reluctant. Call. Very reluctant.
I can completely get with that and empathize with that notion that there's a calling on your life, and but that Jonah experience. No, I'm not going there. Like no, I'm not doing it. And the voice of God saying, "Oh, you're going. You have no choice." So I completely empathize with that. So through this time, Thomas, you said you had a call to preach. You said around you felt the call more vividly around 18, and you accepted around 24. Wow! So it took about 6-7 years.
18, I'm in Jersey. 17, excuse me, I was in Jersey. 24, I'm in California. In between, I'm at the University of Washington in Seattle. So I'm literally doing the Jonah thing. I'm 3,000 miles and trying to run, but you can't. Right.
So you purposely went on the West Coast. It's like, okay, maybe if I go on the West Coast of the country, maybe God won't find me there, or maybe my call won't find me there. So let me go 3,000 miles across the country, and I'll be good. But no, it follows you everywhere, or he follows you everywhere.
I'll tell you something. I moved to California, and we established, grew up in church and everything. So now I'm out of college, first job. And I'm playing basketball every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Shame of it is I don't have no game to start. but the fact is, for the first time in my life, I can. Nobody tell me nothing different.
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing basketball and I tear up my knee,
Oh.
and so I had to have a surgery scope, and I'm home for a week, just laying on the couch. First couple days that was great, catching up on all your sleep, and then all of a sudden now your mind is talking to you, and it's like, you should be in
Mm-hmm.
church. You should be in church. And so I start flipping through the phone book. Back then there were phone books. And I'm looking for an African American church. And I'm living in cowboy country.
Mm.
Okay? There ain't there. But one church in the valley, Pastor Turner, had his picture in the paper. And I went there. Very small church was about this size, but small congregation at that time, 15, 20 people. And just a great man of faith. And back then, when you join a church, they say, you give your hand to the Lord, and where would you like to work out your soul salvation? And I said, I want to give back to the youth. And when I said that, then they said, okay, Sister Helen, come on up. She was the youth director. And Sister Helen, just turns out, small world, she worked in the same town and lived not too far. So we would commute to church together, and we got to be pretty close. She'd say, ooh, I want you to meet my daughter, Dorothy. Ooh, you want to meet? And at that time, like, I don't know about, oh, I'm busy this weekend. Oh, I'm busy, this, that. And then finally, one day, Dorothy came to church. And that's when we first met. And it was like, hey, Sister Helen, is that invitation still open? So I met my wife in the church, also being obedient there.
Yeah, that's cool. I was going to go there next. Like when was it that you met your wife and you kind of went there? So let me push that even further. You all have been married for 25 or 26. Let me get that right.
This year will be 30.
30. So I was way off. So you all have been here for a while. Yes. So this year you will be married 30 years. Wow. Y'all give it up for the
Williams. I'm thinking about that. God bless her. She made it.
Yes. Give it up for Sister Dorothy and Thomas. 30 years of marriage to the woman that God has blessed you with. And through those years, I'm sure you've had ups and downs, as all marriages have, and rocky roads and, just tumultuous situations that come with just this life, and especially with marriage. It's interesting, every time you get up to preach and you recognize your wife, you give, well, what's it called? What is it again?
It's, let me tell you a quick story about that.
Okay, go ahead.
My father always told a story. He's preaching at this church in New York, a large church in New York. It's a big opportunity for him. He's so excited. He's so focused, that he's preaching at this giant church in New York, that he never introduced my mother. And I guess she gave him holy, as Pastor Miller would say, holy particulars about it. And so he would always go out of his way to make sure he then introduced my mother wherever he was. Right. So I learned that lesson. Right. And so I used to introduce, would you guys like to meet the boss? And she told me one time, don't say that no more. So I stopped doing that. And what I do now is like, I tell the story, and after, and here it is, 4 states, 3 kids, and a dog. 30 years later, we're still standing. However, whatever the count is, right. But 30 years later now, we're still standing.
Yeah. And it's very interesting because you paint this picture of the life that you have lived. It's like a summarization of the life that you've lived with her for the past 20 odd years, and to say you've been through 4 different states with her, 3 children with her, and a dog later, that you have this life of partnership and love, and just loving the same person, and having this unconditional love with her and with the 2 of you for 30 years come September. And that is amazing. and to see the relationship that you all have is a very loving one. It's just seeing from afar, and it is great to see that type of relationship, because marriages become a little taboo nowadays,
It's
where
interesting, yeah.
and where it's not as sacred or coveted, or coveted is a bad word. It's not as sacred as a union or desired. Yeah.
Yeah, people are making a choice just not to.
Yeah. And so to see couples like yourself and others that are power couples here in Bethlehem that have been married for years, that is a blessing and an encouragement to those of you who desire to be married. This is a testament to that.
He who finds a good spouse finds a good thing. The text says he who finds a good wife finds a good thing, but I'll open it up because, sisters, if you find a good man, you found a good thing also. So he who finds a good spouse finds a good thing. My pastor, Dr. Bennett, back in Connecticut, always used to call it the ministry of marriage. And I think that's a great way of thinking about it, because, as you know, if you don't put work into your ministry, there's nothing going to show for it and everything. And it's challenging, as you said, because ministry can be messy. Marriages can be messy. They don't work on a schedule. Ministry happens at weird times and in weird places, and usually when you're not ready for it and the like. So I've learned the word intentional. I try to learn from people. Pastor Turner always used to say, I run my whole house. And you'd be like, yeah, he goes, I'm in charge of my house. I run my whole house. I run the washer, I run the dryer, I run the vacuum cleaner, I take care of that, so that when my wife is home, she can chill, she can relax, and then, really show my appreciation. So I can't say I totally live up to my father in the ministry, but I strive towards that.
Right. No, that's great. That's great. So Thomas, I want to shift here a little bit. We're living in very tough times, to say the least, in a very tough year. And dealing with the pandemic of COVID-19 that is particularly running rampant in our state. We're dealing with that. So let me start here first. Like, what do you see as the church, in your perspective? How have we, how should I say, handled the pandemic so far, and from your perspective, and what do you expect for us to gain and learn and come out with when this is over?
Wow, that's a great question. Out of every crisis, there are opportunities and there are lessons to learn. I'll say, coming on this year as a church administrator, I had a to-do list which would say was 80% about this building, repairs and improvements. And it served as a reminder of this pandemic. Just, late at night on with Pastor Miller, all of a sudden it's like, we got to update the database, not just so we have an updated database, so that we can contact and connect with people. And then as we are contacting, connecting with people, you find out, would you mind putting down my emergency contact person in case something happens? Because a lot of older members, I'm living here alone. It's you're dealing with people, Before we were worried about kind of not to say that's what we all fully worried about, but that was my priority though, was what improvements I can make my niche by showing that I've done this. And it's like, no, we have to focus on the people. The how do we communicate? The whole live streaming, something we were dabbling with, but how do we get it up to the next level? How do we get our internet there? And then how do we, again, all of that to say, how do we connect with people and show community when we're not allowed to touch? How do we show community when, if there's 10 or more or 50 or more, you're not allowed to gather? How do we stay connected and keep in touch? That's why I love Faith Talk, because I don't know about you, but there were moments probably about the fourth week of March where you're just so focused on the news and you're 24 hours because you got it on your phone,
Right.
you have it on the TV, you get in your car, you're hearing it on the radio, and it could cause you to stop. So you got to have some positive messages and some words of hope and inspiration. So I think the role of the church is to be the light, to really be the light of the world and the salt of the earth, to speak truth to power, to give hope, to create resources. So, hey, city, yes, we can pass out those goods. You could use us as a site for food distribution to help. Hey, yes, we can be a source of help for this and that. So I think those are the key things. And when we get back, I do not know what the new normal is. I know it will be some type of combination of using the internet as well as being in person. But the bigger point will be it'll always be that mission of how do we make community, how do we stay connected, because we weren't meant to be alone.
Right. That's great. That's great, man. That's great. In the words of Reverend Reginald Sharp Jr., the building is closed, but the church is still open.
Absolutely.
And ministry is still going on. And we talked about this this morning in one of our studies, that ministry is still being done, as you talked about food drives and COVID testing. We did that once or twice, and all of that to service the people. And that's what our mandate has been since Jesus. And so for us to be in our communities and let them know, okay, we're still here. We're still doing the work. We're checking on you. We're concerned about you. We want you to know that Bethlehem in particular and the church at large is seeing about its people, and that's a blessing to know that.
One of the things coming up in the fall is we're going to have to gather our children. How do we interact in an education system that will probably be both? And what you're finding out is well-to-do people have tutors. Middle-class people have their parents that have gone to school and have a background. So if they have to be virtual, they're kind of taking shifts and teaching the kids and making sure they stay on pace. Hours where they, we can't take a shift. I don't got the time to take off. We both have to work,
Right.
and we're both in that, and we're counting on the kid to make sure they're logging in and doing this assignment. And if they're only half understanding the message, so we have to be able to share what resources are available and how we can connect. Two, we have to have a longer term vision. How do we get our kids, to get a tradition of education beyond high school? That's the other role I work in now. How do we get them into an education beyond high school where they are preparing themselves so that they can go on to college, or they can go on to get career or technical training so that they can make a life for themselves. But you just can't decide that in the middle of your senior year. We have to do some things in advance. And again, back to the heritage that you and I grew up, we learned those things in the church. We went to baseball games in the church. We learned that in the church. So we're going to have to break out that tradition. I call it the affirmative action generation. There was no excuse. You got to work twice as hard and and be twice as smart, and you had to be after it. And so we have to instill that also in our children, that you going to make it. Oh no, there's no doubt. There ain't no half stepping. You're going to figure this out, and we're going to get you there one way or another. If I have to call Deacon so-and-so because I know he knows algebra, or if I have to call Sister so-and-so because I know she knows biology, we're going to make those extra phone calls so you can get the help you need. And that's where I see us really being, how do we help people? How do we change lives? In addition to saying Jesus is the way. It goes back to, I can't have somebody that says they're hungry and just say, I'll pray for you and walk away. We got to be able to feed them.
It takes a village, right? That's great, man. Great stuff. Absolutely great stuff. So let me touch on this particular pandemic. We are dealing with two pandemics, like we discussed, having to deal with as the church of COVID-19. But to shift to the pandemic of racism, how it's reared its ugly head back up, and in particular with police brutality. And every guest that we've had on the show, we've kind of pushed and asked and prodded just to see where everybody thinks. And I wanted to see, because you're very passionate about this area, and I love to get your thoughts. I love talking to you about stuff like this. To see this generation unifying together, not, you don't even just see just black young women and men, but of all races, of all countries and continents, and creeds and ethnicities, and genders and orientations. You see all of that of a unified front against bigotry and racism and prejudice. This generation, from my perspective, in my eyes, all it's known to see from the people who are there to protect and serve is trauma and excessive force and murders and killings. And it could really mess a young person up to see images and videos and recordings and Facebook posts and Instagram posts and all of this with the police who are there to protect and serve. So they don't know a generation of cops who are going to protect them from danger. When they see the police, or if they're driving and a cop pulls up beside them, your heart stops and you have no idea what could happen. And to live in fear like that with individuals who are supposed to protect and serve, that's scary. And to see that we're dealing with that every day. So let me ask you, I'm sorry to go on that long diatribe, because I have a passion about it as well.
Yes.
And what do you say? What are your feelings about what we've been dealing with?
I believe I shared on a Bible study one time. I've been tested with that very question with my daughter, Dominique, who's 25, and she just broke it down just like you. All I know, you talk about the improvements, and you talk about hope, Dad, and you talk about this, but hey, I'm not giving everybody an invite to the picnic, because all I know is this overreach and abuse that always gets excused and whitewashed. So what are you saying to me now? Where's God in this? And that was a reckoning moment. And the good news that comes through that is what I saw then on the screens, which were, these weren't just only kids of color, as you said, but all faiths, all ages, especially the young people, because whenever there's a revolution of change, it's usually the young generation that's bringing it out. And to see young kids calling it out and educating themselves, whoa, I did not know this. Nobody taught me this in school. When did this Black Wall Street occur? These are white kids talking about. When did all this occur? Wait a minute. What happened to the 40 acres and a mule? How come we did? Why did we renege on that offer? All that. Yeah. And what I've been pressing people, no, it is our time. I'm tired of people asking me questions. I have to explain it. No, this is the time. We've been waiting for somebody to ask the question to get an understanding. While we have a moment to have this dialogue, we have to have it, as awkward and as uncomfortable as it is. We need to have that dialogue and to have that conversation so that true, long-lasting change will come. Protests have to be with purpose. So protests with a goal. Straight talk for straight understanding. We're off message, and I think when we say defund the police, it's like I need a cop every now and then. I need somebody to come by. However, can we reimagine what policing looks like? So that if I have a domestic dispute that is because of mental illness or something like that, that we're sending over a mental health worker or social worker with that police that can work on de-escalation. Let's get creative about that. How do we make the cops part of the community, the police part of the community, so it becomes less an antagonistic situation to one where we are? What is it that makes you so fearful of me that put your hands up? I put my hands up, poof, and you're shooting. It's like, what is it that causes us to be so fearful? How do we talk and have conversations, whether that's hiring practices or training, or is it just getting people in the room? What are we doing to set hair triggers off? Let me know. I'll change that up and stuff. But the fact is, hey, one thing I can't change. I can't change the fact that I'm black. Can't change the fact that I'm a male in America. So those aren't going to change. So tell me, how else can we work together and walk together and make this work out for the long term? Because we all want healthy communities, and we all want to be protected, to feel safe, to feel secure. And if something's going off, we want to be able to make that call without wondering, oh snap, because people have called and they're the ones that end up getting arrested or shot. We want that to be like, hey, let's work this out where it's not an issue. And then we have to be very intentional. The word is intentional. I think we're starving in a supermarket. We need to be intentional about getting our kids and us the health, mental, the social, emotional health that we need, the help we need with that. So again, with all this darkness and isolation, that's a bad combination.
Yes.
That's a bad combination. So again, in society, what you're hearing, a big part of this, why we have to go back to school call, is there are kids that are trapped. Think about this, man. They're trapped because their parents are abusing, somebody in the household, I should say, parent, are abusing them. Wait a second, I'm supposed to be home where I'm safe. That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
We're staying home where you can be safe. Well, what happens when the home isn't safe? So again, a case for our social workers and our mental health experts. How do we get those connections and safety for our children and the like? So there's a lot of praying, but then there's going to need to be a lot of read and reacting. How do we facilitate and also educate people to reach out and share with them where the resources are?
That's great. And we're going to have in the coming weeks some educators and some mental health experts and things like that.
This is a great vehicle for exactly that.
Great. I love it. It's great, man. Great. So let me ask you this. You're probably the first person that I've asked this. Do you believe there can be law enforcement reform? I know that's a packed thing, but
it's a nuanced answer. Yes, but yes, you see some places that are already making changes. I can't remember. It was the associate sheriff. This is the shame. 5 years ago, I sat in for a pastor at a meeting with clergy and the sheriff's department, and he was talking about policing. This was after, again, an unarmed black man being murdered, being killed, and the person being let go of. So he made the point that it is difficult to get rid of a bad cop. You can fire them, but they also go to through the union. They'll go to what do you call that? A hearing, basically, arbitration. and they can get back to job. So here you are, the chief or the sheriff, and this person's a bad apple, bad apple.
Bad apple.
So we've taken care of that one, but no, because the union fights for everybody, they get back in there. So there has to be a mechanism where we can just really, as a country and as a society, decide what do we think policing should be and how do we want it. When I was seeing, and I think we will start to, I'm hopeful because I think we'll have these conversations. You saw, again, because of the protesters, the mix of them, Philadelphia, and I'm seeing this officer wind up and swing that baton, which is basically a metal bat, on this young girl, blonde hair, blue eyed, and I'm seeing this little Chinese kid face down, getting the business, and I'm seeing all these things, and I'm thinking, okay, now that I think we're going to start having a larger conversation, people are seeing things.
Right.
And even after this, you'd think there would be a stand down, but no, each and every day there's still an event. So I think there's going to be a larger conversation that hopefully will lead to some change. But there are some systematic barriers in there that hold it. If there was so there has to be a mechanism for the accountability. And I know even with the police reform that Senator Scott, a Republican from South Carolina, brought up, one of the big points there is basically, I'm going to say it wrong, but there's kind of an immunity that police have in order to take certain actions, and they want to try to reform that. Unless you reform that, there really is no accountability.
Right.
So again, between the arbitrations, if I'm trying to get rid of a bad person and the like, and those things, it makes it difficult. So a lot of people are a lot more closer to it, and it's smarter than I, but we have to have these conversations. And again, not defunding the police, but it's a reimagining of those resources. Why are we putting police in certain situations where they're going to be doomed to fail, and there might be somebody better to do that? Let's give our officers the best shot at being successful, and to have a mindset of de-escalation. One last thing. One of the things that the sheriff mentioned, and boy, it came true not that long ago. 3 kids were being arrested for jaywalking across an empty street. And they were kind of roughly arrested as they were jaywalking across the empty street. His point back then was, there are some things that we don't, hey guys, to make sure we don't go across that street, and you drive on. There's no need, or hey, we're going to take that away from you. There's some things that aren't worth the arrest.
Yeah.
Why are we doing these
no
things
need,
over this thing? Last thing behind that, it also has to be criminal reform, the laws. Republican governor in Oklahoma, he made the point that I'm going to give the wrong number, there's 1,000 laws on the book. My goal is in 4 years, I'm going to reduce that to 400. What are we doing? He goes, what are we chasing after? None of these, some of these don't make a difference. They're only there to be punitive. How do we clean that up? So a greater mindset like that reforms it and also makes it more equitable. Cocaine, if you get caught with, you have to get a pound to get,
Right.
a few years. If I get a gram of crack, all of a sudden I'm doing 20 years.
Right.
We have to make those things more equitable. So it has to be a wholesale, holistic review of our laws of criminality. We have more people in jail in the United States of America than any other place in the world. And when you look at the escalation of it, really escalates in 1994 with the crime reform bill, and it just skyrockets to, because it's paying for the penitentiary system, which is the new plantation.
Right.
So we have to really take a look at that and make those hard choices as a society and make those adjustments. There's no reason we have a few million people in jail. Makes no sense.
Yeah. Wow, that's great stuff. Wonderful insight for this, and we needed that. So let me shift to something a little less heavy.
Okay.
And won't keep you any longer. Just tell me, when you're not preaching, when you're not working, when you don't have your church administrator hat on, you don't have your preacher hat on, which is probably rare nowadays. Nowadays, when you're constantly working and you got your own separate work that you do, what is a relaxing time for you that you feel like, okay, I need to just get away from this? What is it that relaxes you?
It's interesting. I will chill music, videos and music and play. My music collection stopped in the middle of the 90s. right when my kids came, all of a sudden my music stopped about there. But I like a wide genre of that. Back when Napster was out, you remember Napster? My wife would joke that I was going to be named as one of the people in the trial, for my use. Yeah, I like listening to music or listening, watching videos and the like, reading. Essays. I got to get back to my reading. That's something I missed. From a corporate perspective, you're told, well, you're not paid to write a paragraph. Not paid by the word. So concise. But yet these books. So now all of a sudden it's like, ooh, I have a hard time reading a book these days. But getting back to that is something I want to do. My wife has challenged me. You do have to reconnect. On what are those joys again. I like talking to people, just picking up the phone. Hey, how you doing? Funny story is, it's funny. One of my friends in college I did a Bible study with, Brian Nakamura, Japanese, of Japanese descent, Andy Kao, Chinese, from Taiwan, and myself, we were faithful to this Bible study for like 3 years on a Friday night. So tell me what we were doing. and Andy's both of them great guys. Andy's a great guy, and Andy had moved. Last I had heard from Andy is like 15, 16 years ago that he had moved back to China. Went back to do ministry in China. And all of a sudden, I never never send me a note on Facebook Messenger. I seldom look at it. But for whatever reason, I couldn't sleep one night, and I roll over, I'm looking at Facebook Messenger, and then all of a sudden, I see this name that's kind of unfamiliar. He had his niece look me up. Hi, Thomas. This is Andy's niece, such and such, Andy Kao. And and Andy writes this: hey, you might remember me. I used to do Bible study with you for 3 years, and you were the best man in my wedding. I'm like, of course I remember you. I was the best man in your wedding. Of course I remember. And he has the picture of the wedding, like, to prove it to me and stuff like that. And so we're going to actually connect tonight at 7.
That's cool.
And that will be first time in like 15 years.
That's cool.
I'm praying for, I got a friend, Rob Papchak, somebody I grew up in high school. My brother gives me a call and says, hey, Janet Papchak reached out to you. Janet Papchak, okay. Yeah, Robbie's, he's battling an illness and he wanted to connect. We hadn't talked. I'm talking like big wheel days, and we grew up in elementary school and all that. But we hadn't talked probably since I left for college. And for the past two and a half years, every other week we're like on the phone talking, and as he goes through his treatments and everything. So praying for him and encouraging him, and so things like that like make my day. People who I've counseled in the past, hearing their stories of triumph, and it always amazes me because you see people in their brokenness, and you just have to remind them of the hope and the potential. So back to your other question, again, it's the hope and the potential they have, and then to hear their stories of triumph and how they're getting through and making it. It just, I'm just on the end of the phone going like this, yeah, praise the Lord. So things like that. My wife would say that's kind of sad, but yeah, that does it for me, man.
That's good, though. Yeah, I dig it. I love it, man. That's cool. So I thank you, man, for your time. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. We thank you for joining us and giving us just insight on your life and your passions. This was a great episode. I enjoyed this, man.
You the man. Like I said,
I enjoyed this, man.
like I said, you're doing something really wonderful, something really great. And this is, I think I was talking to Robin, how are we going to connect in this new season? And then next thing I know, I think Elijah is telling me, have you checked out Faith Talk? Matt's doing this thing. And then, I checked it out. I was like, he's not just doing his thing. He's doing this thing. He's doing this thing. So, man, keep on doing what you're doing. Stay encouraged because this is great.
I appreciate it, man. Listen, share this episode with Reverend Thomas Williams. This has been a great episode. I pray that you've enjoyed it. We will be back next week for another special guest. God bless you, family.